exam technique. There is a separate video about command words because I felt that warranted its own video. There's also, or there probably will be other bits of exam technique within other videos on the channel. But this is the one that's specifically about the different styles of question, sort of some do's, some don'ts, that kind of thing. Some of it will be applicable to those of you in the first year, some of it's more applicable to those of you in year 2, because I am going to cover all styles of question in this, and you don't experience all styles of question in the first year. I will try and make that really, really clear as we are going through. Okay. I will probably repeat this many times in various videos and definitely in lessons, so I do apologise, but I always say the hardest thing about A-level geography is the way they write the questions. It's not the content. The content has tricky moments every now and again, but it's broadly quite straightforward. It's working out what they want you to do in the exam is the hardest thing, which means we practice exam technique right from the very beginning, throughout year 1, throughout year 2. But for some of you, it will be a challenge. And I'm not saying that to be horrible or to frighten you. I'm just saying that to be honest. It was certainly the biggest challenge for me, and it often is for many of our students. So it's about making sure you are answering the question that is actually there rather than one that you wish was there. And it's about reading that question a good few times to make sure you know what it's asking. And that will come with practice, okay? They take a long time to write the questions. I mention this quite often. When I started writing questions, I had no idea how much time and thought went into the writing of the question. It's incredible. And the trouble is, in exam conditions, the adrenaline's pumping, you skim read it, and that's not going to end well. So the ringing endorsement that I want to give you is make sure you read them, and practice is essential, I think is the right word. And it basically is that. You will get more marks for a short correct answer than a long incorrect one. The more time you spend thinking and planning, it's not in vain, okay? It is going to help you. And practice won't make perfect, which is the saying, or at least better, all right? We're not aiming for perfection. You don't need perfection to get a good grade. We just need to kind of, make progress. Right. So this is information about the 3 exams that you have. Please ignore those dates. These were the dates for summer 2024. If you're watching this at another time, these dates will be different, okay? So just bear that in mind. Everything else is the same, but the dates will be different. So your first exam will be coasts and changing places. And then your second exam is water and carbon, global governance, and a synoptic essay. If you're in year 1, we do not start talking to you about the synoptic essay until year 2. So that won't mean anything to you at this point. And then your third exam is everything that you learned in year 2 only. They get 15 minutes longer each time, and you get more to do each time. But the first 2 exams, which are based on year 1 stuff, you get part A's, part B's, and a small essay, which might be 15 or 20 marks. And to all intents and purposes, there's not any difference in the way that you approach a 15 or 20 mark essay. Obviously, there's a 5-mark difference, but there's no difference from your perspective. And then in year 2, we will build up to longer essays, and we'll tell you more about them at the time. So basically, folks, there are 4 styles of question. There's part A's, part B's, short essays, which are either 15 or 20 marks, and then the year 2 essays, one of which is synoptic. Okay, right. Just a good bit of news in case you're sat there freaking out right now. We have what's called a positive marking exam board, which means they are looking to give you credit. We are not looking to penalise you. If we find incorrect information, we just ignore it. Okay, now unfortunately it might be that the whole of your answer is incorrect, in which case you will get 0. But if you've done a generally pretty good answer and then made some silly mistake, we will just ignore that silly mistake. We will not deduct marks. Okay, and the second thing, and oh, I don't know why it's doing that, this is one of my favourite things about this exam board and one of the reasons that we are with them. There is a lot of geography that can be applied to many different questions, and the trouble with writing a mark scheme is it's hard to anticipate all of the different things that people could put in their answer. So what the exam boards say is if it's correct and relevant geography, it will get marked, even if it's not on the mark scheme. Okay, now that's not true necessarily for other geography exam boards. I cannot comment on other subjects because every subject is managed individually at an exam board. So what I'm telling you here only applies to geography, but for geography, for some other exam boards, if it's not on the mark scheme, it doesn't get credited. For this exam board, it does. All right, so it's good, really. Types of question then, a bit more. Part A's are what you will start practicing in year 1. We start them really early on, and you get some kind of a resource, and then you get a question about it. Now, this is a water and carbon one. It's a flow diagram. We are not going to go through the answer for it, but so you get a flow diagram, then you get a line graph, that's a part A question, then you get a map, and then you get a table. So that's what I mean by resource-based. They're going to give you some kind of resource and they're going to ask you a question about it. Occasionally, and I do want to emphasise that word, occasionally the part A question will be maths-based, and we will practice those as we go along the 2 years. Part B questions you have to have revised for. So part A's, sorry, wrong thing. Part A's, you can't actually revise for them. You just have to deal with them on the day. You have to look at the map, you have to describe it. You have to look at the line graph and you have to analyse what's changed. You can't revise for part A's, all you can do is practice. Okay, and then you get a knowledge question, a part B. Outline how long-term changes in the size of Earth's cryosphere, ice store, affects the size of other major water stores. So you would have to have revised sea level change, you'd have to have revised the relationship between how much water is in the ice and how much water is in the sea. You need to know what you're talking about for that part B. So that's a part B, but you don't need a structure, you just answer the question, but by all means chuck in a case study. We make you learn a load of case studies, so chuck them in at any possible opportunity. Right, you won't think that they're little in year 1, but when you're in year 2 looking back, you'll think they are. 15 and 20 mark essays. These are the ones that we will probably have to practice the most, and that's fine, we are used to doing that. So at the end of your first and second exams, there will be a choice. There's always a choice of questions, and these are the ones that we have to have a nice structure for, okay? So a 3-part structure means we need an introduction, a main body, and a conclusion. The introduction and conclusion could be 1 sentence, possibly 2, but we'd like them to be there. And then we want the main body to be structured using something called the PEER technique. Point, explain, evidence, refer. You make a point, whatever that might be. I don't know. Coastal erosion varies over the course of the year. That might be your point. You then explain it by talking about constructive and destructive waves and the weather and the amount of wave energy. So you'd explain your point using all of the geography that you could possibly remember. You'd back it up with evidence. So you might use the 2014 storms where waves were frequently over 10 metres and the train line at Dawlish got eroded and all of that stuff. And then you refer back to the question. Overall, this proves that coastal erosion can vary quite significantly, whatever it happens to be. So that's what I mean by peer structure, and we'll practice that a lot in class. You ideally want 2 or 3 of those, and you should then be on track for a really, really good answer. What we will do over the course of your A-level is we will practice planning sometimes and answering sometimes lots and lots of 15 and 20 mark questions. We will not work through all of those. We won't have time to work through all of those. So what we will sometimes do is set them for Hewish 30 and set them for revision and things like that. But the trick with 15 and 20 mark questions is getting used to reading and interpreting them. The more that you look at, the more you will get used to their phrasing. You will get used to thinking quickly, what am I going to do for the introduction? What am I going to do? The more you practice, the quicker you will get. Now, the handwriting on this is not the most legible thing you've ever seen, but this is a full mark, 15 out of 15 answer. So the original examiner gave it 14 out of 15, and then a senior examiner said no, that is a full mark answer. So this is 15 out of 15. And I'm just going to point out a few bits to you. This is the introduction. It's quite nice and short, but what it's doing is it's getting marks from the beginning. What this examiner does is anytime they see something they like, they underline it. You may not have studied this topic. This is in Changing Places, and it's the idea that when you have a process called deindustrialisation, you get something called the spiral of decline, and we learn about the effects of the spiral of decline on Bridgewater, Detroit and Glasgow. So that's what the question is about. Even if you haven't got to that point in your A-level yet, hopefully you'll be able to recognise some sort of key features of why this gets full marks. Industrial decline is when Industrial decline in urban places, has led to a process called the spiral of decline. This is when the loss of industry has a negative multiplier effect and the impacts are seen elsewhere as a direct cause. So apologies that my reading of that was not brilliant. What we've done then is we've got a short introduction that is just explaining what industrial decline is and setting out its stall. That's all you want an introduction to do. Short, to the point, but you're getting marks immediately rather than repeating the question. We then, and don't worry, I'm not going to attempt to read these out to you, go into some nice peer paragraphs. Look, one place that has seen industrial decline is Detroit. That's the point they're trying to make. They explain it, they back it up with evidence, and then as we can see right at the end, right at the bottom of this slide, therefore the consequences can be catastrophic, leading to the decline of an entire city. We've got a nice little reference back to the question. And we repeat the process. So what this student does so well is the peer technique. There's the point, there's the explain, there's the evidence. Therefore, consequently, we've got all 4 things. And then we have a third one. And finally, we have a nice little conclusion. Again, it's short, but it wraps up the whole answer and ties it off nicely. Okay, so that's what we mean by those. If you're in year 2 or you're a curious year 1 student, the other types of essays. A synoptic essay is where you are attempting to show that you understand that all of these modules that you've learned about in geography actually link together in the real world. So coasts is affected by weather and climate is affected by humans. Like it's just, in the real world, they're not separate modules, they all work together. But I'll tell you more about those. And there's actually a separate video about synoptic essays on the channel if you want to watch that, because they are a little bit different. I think, I would say this, I'm a teacher, I think they're easier, but that's my take. And then the long essays are very similar to the 15 and 20 markers in terms of we want a 3-part structure, we want peer paragraphs, we want loads of case studies, but even more importantly in year 2, we must have an argument, and that's what we'll be practicing in your second year. You have to be able to argue whatever it is the topic is about. So they are the style of questions. They all require something different from you, which is where the skills come in. That some people, there are part Bs, which are 8 marks, and you get a bit of a choice for these, folks. Some people like to see them as even short essays, or just crack on and answer them, okay? I have no preference. You're not going to see any difference in the marking of them. It's kind of your decision of, do you want, so part Bs could be 5 marks, crack on and answer. Part Bs could be 8 marks. It's up to you, whatever is easier for your brain. Do you think it will be easier for you to remember to treat them as short essays, or do you think it'd be easier for your brain just to crack on and answer them and not worry about an intro and all of that stuff? So that's a bit of a choice. And to be honest, I think if you're in year 1, you probably are not ready to make that decision yet. I think you need to wait till year 2 and be ready for the full range of questions and then make that decision at that time. And then what I've got here are mark schemes so that you can see them. I've very optimistically only given you the top band, look, because it would be nice to be aiming for the top band there, and then you get all the ones here. In a nutshell, folks, okay, you have to do more as the number of marks increases. I'm sure that's pretty obvious to you. In a 15-mark question, so you will get these for coasts and changing places. How much you know about the geography is going to get you 10 marks. How well you answer the question gets you 5 marks. So this is where your revision and your knowledge of your case studies comes in. This is where your practicing of exam technique comes in. So for the 15 markers, the knowledge is more important. For the 20 markers, which is global governance and water and carbon, they are equally important. We need to be as good at our exam technique as we are at our knowledge and understanding of geography. This is the synoptic essay. This is the odd one out. And as I say, there's a whole other video about these. But notice that there's an AO3 that has crept in for year 2. And in this particular case, that's how well you use the resources that they give you. But I'm not going to go into that here. And then with the final essays, the AO3 is not worth very many marks. So it's worth 4 out of 38 and 5 out of 45. And it is quite literally, can you do a decent structure? And if you can have an intro, a main body, a conclusion, and the peer technique, you're going to get full marks for those. And that's why I say if you can do all of that in a 15 and a 20, by the time you have to do it for a 38 and a 45, you're going to nail it. Yeah, because you've just practiced it so many times. And then this is something we'll pick up on in other videos. So just an overview. Hopefully that hasn't freaked you out too much. Apologies if it has.